Alright guys, welcome back to Underground Science. In this video, we're going to be talking about Xeroderma Pigmentosum. Alright, so first things first, it's autosomal recessive. So that's good to know for the genetics portion of this disease. So remember, this disease is related to a defect in the nucleotide excision repair process. What this disease is related to the fact that, remember, nucleotide excision repair is good for repairing helix distorting lesions like pyrimidine dimers. We went over a thymine dimer repair example in our last video for nucleotide excision repair. So in Xeroderma pigmentosum, you cannot repair pyrimidine dimers caused by UV radiation, okay? So what happens is, again, we have a defect in nucleotide excision repair process. So that's a single-stranded DNA repair process, right? And so what that means is, in Xeroderma pigmentosum, what we see is that you have a higher risk of skin cancers. Now, what type of skin cancers? Right, we have melanoma, increased risk of getting melanoma, basal cell carcinoma, and squamous cell carcinoma. Right, these are the three main types of skin cancers that you have an increased risk of getting in patients with Xeroderma pigmentosum. Okay, so also patients with Xeroderma pigmentosum, we see that you get a lot of sunburns just from a little bit of sun exposure. Okay, so severe sunburns from a little bit of sun exposure. Okay, because you're very sensitive to sun, because remember, UV radiation creates thymine dimers, and people with Xeroderma pigmentosum cannot repair those thymine dimers. Another important thing that you should keep in mind for Xeroderma pigmentosum is keratitis, so inflammation of your cornea. So along with keratitis, you may also see corneal ulcers in patients with Xeroderma pigmentosum. So corneal ulcers, and keratitis. Another thing that we should keep in mind is that you may see dry skin in patients with Xeroderma pigmentosum. Repeated sun exposure can also lead to telangiectasias, so small dilated blood vessels, that we went over when we talked about ataxia telangiectasia. And then you can also see an increased count of freckles and hyperpigmentation, okay, on the patient's skin who has Xeroderma pigmentosum. All right. So again, that's the three types of skin cancers that you have an increased risk of getting if you have Xeroderma pigmentosum. Those types of skin cancers are melanoma, basal cell carcinoma, and squamous cell carcinoma. All right. You also see severe sunburns in patients with Xeroderma pigmentosum just from a little bit of sun exposure, so they're photosensitive. You can see keratitis and corneal ulcers, so inflammation of the cornea and corneal ulcers, right, which is not good. And then dry skin, telangiectasias, and increased freckles and hyperpigmentation are important to keep in mind. Okay. Now another thing, the nervous system takes a hit too if you have a defect in the nucleotide excision repair, because the nucleotide excision repair process is also involved in the repair of DNA after it's exposed to reactive oxygen species. Because we're forming reactive oxygen species in our mitochondria, right? Because we have the electron transport chain. So what that means is, in your nerve cells, right, in your nerve cells that are involved in your nervous system, that are part of your nervous system, if you have a defect in nucleotide excision repair, that means you can't properly repair the DNA damage that is done from reactive oxygen species. So that can lead to things like ataxia, right, neuropathy, and hearing loss, right? Especially, for example, if your auditory nerve was affected, for example, right, and you can't properly repair the damage done by the reactive oxygen species, right, because your nucleotide excision repair mechanism is not working properly. So that can lead to a problem in hearing, like hearing loss, neuropathy, ataxia, just nervous system issues, right, which these three are. And so that's a correlation between defect in nucleotide excision repair in your nervous system. Okay. And then also we went over Xeroderma pigmentosum, which is also caused by a defect in your nucleotide excision repair mechanism. All right. So that's Xeroderma pigmentosum, and hopefully you guys learned something. And thanks for watching. All right, see you guys in my next videos.